high to Friday, September 26th, Thursday the 25th in the North Atlantic. And we have several systems still to talk about in the tropics today. We're going to start off in the Western Pacific with Tropical Storm Bualoi, a Philippine name Opong in the central Philippines. The system over the past few days has been intensifying throughout the Philippine Sea and briefly did become a typhoon yesterday, but it's now weakened a bit as it's interacting with the central Philippines. But this system is forecast to bring heavy rainfall throughout the day today across the central Philippines, which could lead to some significant flooding issues along all these areas here. But in the future of this system, it will be entering the South China Sea this weekend, and odds now favor this system having a decent chance to intensify back into a typhoon, potentially a strong one, as it tracks west and nears southern China and eastern Vietnam towards late this weekend and into early next week. If we look at the environment for this system, now over the past few days, the system has been dealing with some of the northeasterly shear that we talked about a couple of days ago. You can see on this initialization from the GFS model, all this northeasterly shear that cut across the Philippine Sea, and that luckily capped how strong the system got before it made landfall in the Philippines. But now we're seeing the system weaken from a combination of the shear and land interaction with the central Philippines. But one question that we were really looking for to be answered was where exactly would the system come into the Philippines? We didn't know if it was going to come further north or further south across the central Philippines. And this made such a difference because there's a lot more water here in the central Philippines, and that may allow the system to maintain its structure a little bit better than if it tracked further north across a higher terrain in Luzon in the northern Philippines. Alongside that, it would be closer if it was further north to this little upper low that you can see over Taiwan, and that could have imparted some shear going forward into the South China Sea. But now we're further south, we're moving across the central Philippines today, and going forward, the environment is forecast to get fairly favorable for the system to intensify or re-intensify in the South China Sea. You'll see all this northeasterly flow that was shearing the system before the Philippines back off, and the only source of shear might be this upper level low, but this is weakening with time, and it is a little bit further away now, moving further south from this upper low. So there's not forecast to be too much shear overall from this upper low. And so apart from that, we have a fairly good environment for the system to intensify in. We have all this divergence aloft with a monsoonal flow for the southwest. That's where air is spreading away at the top of the troposphere and promotes rising air, in this case over the South China Sea. And Bualoi being here in the South China Sea by this point is going to benefit from that. That's going to help form thunderstorms and allow pressure falls, and which will allow the system to intensify. And you'll see that happen. The red number decreases, and on the model here, we get a fairly strong typhoon coming into central Vietnam and southern China by this point. And the GFS is not alone in this idea anymore. The European has also seen this potential and has come up on its forecasts than it was a couple of days ago, now showing potentially a strong typhoon coming into, again, southern China or central Vietnam. Now, there is still a little bit of wiggle room onto exactly where the system could track, and that does have some uncertainty onto exactly how strong the system could get. If it tracks further north, we could see the system interact with Hainan. That could cap the intensification we see. If it tracks further south, it may come into Vietnam earlier, so that may also cap the amount of intensification we see. But regardless, we are expecting it to be a typhoon again when it comes into any of those land areas further west. And if it does go in between Vietnam and Hainan, there is potential for more strengthening beyond that. And we could see, like the GFS shows, what could be a stronger typhoon coming into this part of the world. So this is absolutely something to pay attention to if you're in southern China and eastern Vietnam. I know we just got done with Regasta, but another one is on the way. So make sure you're keeping an eye on this and getting preparations ready, so when the system does come through, you're ready to put those action plans in play. This is the current forecast from Pagasa. Now, they don't show the full forecast over the next few days because this does get out of the area of responsibility, but you can get the general picture here of what we're expecting. The system remaining a severe tropical storm as it tracks out the Philippines today into early on Saturday, and then it enters the South China Sea and begins to re-intensify as the environment gets favorable. And we may see the system get to a fairly strong typhoon in this part of the South China Sea. And again, southern China and eastern Vietnam are the target areas for the system going forward. And I'll have more videos on this throughout the weekend and early next week as the system tracks further west. But now we're going to shift focus to the North Atlantic as we have two systems to talk about here. We have three systems still technically active, but Gabrielle has turned post-tropical, still has hurricane warnings out for the Azores Islands as there could be some hurricane force winds tonight, but the system will be clearing the area by tomorrow afternoon. And because it's post-tropical, we're not really going to talk about that. I mainly focus on tropical systems overall. But starting off with our two systems here, Humberto is on the right, 94L is on the left. We're going to start off with the easier one, which is Tropical Storm Humberto, though these systems will likely have, some intertwined future with each other. Now, for now, the system has been gradually intensifying over the day to day. We've seen the system structure get better suited for a phase of quicker intensification likely into this weekend. We've seen convection, deep convection wrap around the system's center, and if you look at some microwave data that we got earlier this afternoon, we've even seen some signs of a mid-level eye trying to form on this microwave data. Now, there is some vertical tilt with height, as there is some westerly shear being imparted upon the vortex. It's hard to see on this visible imagery, but we do have an upper trough sitting in the western Atlantic like this, and it's imparting westerly shear across the north of the Caribbean islands across the western Atlantic, and this is hitting Humberto right now. So if you look at this, if you kind of look at some of these spiral band kind-like features on this microwave, you can kind of infer these surface centers about here. So the mid-level center would be here, and we have some vertical tilt with height with the structure of Humberto. But as we go in time, this trough is going to be weakening, partly because of Humberto, but also it's just weakening right now. It has been for the past several days. And eventually the system is going to be within an environment favorable for intensification into a hurricane and likely a major hurricane once it gets to the western Atlantic. You can see by this point, this is out to Sunday morning, we now have the trough completely gone from this part of the Atlantic, and overall, Humberto has a very favorable environment with upper level high pressure generally across this part of the Atlantic. Now, the one caveat to this is Invest 94L further west. You can see on this particular run of the GFS, 94L is actually getting going a little bit faster than it has over the past few runs, and so this is able to impart perhaps a little bit of shear upon Humberto, and this could be a limiting factor onto exactly how strong the system could get. Though this is not a high confidence shear and is highly dependent on what 94L does overall. And for now, the consensus still has this getting fairly strong into a major hurricane, which is the current forecast from the National Hurricane Center. You can see intensifying gradually over the next couple of days, but then becoming a major hurricane as we head into the latter half of this week and into early next week. Late this weekend into early next week. Mixed up my wordings there a little bit. But as it tracks further northwest, shear begins to increase, more so because we have this big trough sitting here with a subtropical jet across the southeastern Atlantic, or southeastern U.S., and this will likely begin to weaken the system by this point. Now, the track here is a little bit uncertain because there could be some interaction with 94L further west. Hopefully we can keep this kind of a track because this is much similar to Hurricane Erin a couple of months ago, or about a month ago, where it went directly in between Bermuda and the eastern United States. So this would be the best case scenario where the system would be avoiding all land areas entirely, so avoiding land impacts entirely. Hopefully we can keep this, but there is, some uncertainty with 94L, which we're going to start talking about now, as this system has a fairly complex future ahead of it. Now, right now, the system is very weak. It's still in its very early stages of development, and it is still a tropical wave at this point. You can see there's a little bit of rotation here off the north coast of Haiti, and this is where the surface circulation is. It has now come north of Hispaniola like this today. But similar to Humberto, the system is getting sheared out of the west actually by the same trough, and so all the showers and thunderstorms are pushed off to the eastern side. And so really the imminent thing that we're watching for the system is the potential for flash flooding with heavy rains across Hispaniola and maybe even Puerto Rico still, as some of these showers and thunderstorms continue to be pushed off to the eastern side of the system. And alongside this has come with a vertical tilt with height. If I go to the mid-level relative humidity plot, you can see in the ISO bars, which is the surface flow, the wind barbs, which is the mid-level flow, and if I go back to the beginning here, you can see there's kind of a kink here in the ISO bars showing you this is where the surface circulation is. That's where we found it on this visible imagery. But if you look at the wind barbs, you can see the most significant kink in the flow is over here by the Dominican Republic. And so the mid-level axis is like here. So we have this vertical tilt, and for the short term, this will likely hold back a lot of development we see out of the system. And this tells us that it's not going to be developing rapidly in the Turks and Caicos and southeastern Bahamas. But as I mentioned with Humberto, the upper trough that's sitting across the western Atlantic is weakening with time. And much like with Humberto, that's going to decrease the westerly shear over 94L by this point. And so as we go in time into this weekend, we see the moisture become much more aligned vertically with the surface low, and we begin to see the system form into a tropical depression or tropical storm on the model. In fact, we see that happen by early next week. This is by Sunday even. We have a tropical storm forming on the model and tracking northwest of the Bahamas and towards the southeast United States coast. Now, one issue with this is the models right now are sort of guessing where the system is going to consolidate. We still don't have a well-formed area of low pressure, as you can see on this, so models are going to be flip-flopping a lot over the next day still, and we've certainly seen that. I mean, the GFS right now has the system coming into the southeast coast. I know this has been the consensus now of the trend for most model guidance today, but this is still a highly uncertain forecast, and there's no guarantee still right now that the system is going to make landfall in the Carolinas. I'd say the chances have definitely increased, but we're not looking at it as being the guaranteed locked-in scenario. There are still a lot of scenarios that the system could go through, and what we really need to see is where does the surface center really consolidate over the next couple of days. As, like I said, models are right now kind of just playing a guessing game. Where is it going to form? And that has huge implications on where the system is going to track, because the main steering feature of the system, and Humberto as well, is a deep layer ridge sitting over the western Atlantic. It's the Bermuda High. And this system's relation, the position relative to the center of this ridge, is going to be crucial in how far or how fast it tracks towards the northwest. In the GFS's example, you see it consolidate here a little bit further north. It's more over the Turks and Caicos Islands, pretty far from the northern coast of Cuba. So it's closer to this ridge in general. So the pull on the system towards the northwest is stronger. And because of that, the system tracks to the northwest faster. And by Tuesday, this is by 8 p.m. Monday local time, we have a tropical storm making landfall in the Carolinas on this model. But if we take a look at the European AI model at the same time, 8 p.m. on Monday, we see that this system, 94L, would be Imelda by this point, is slower, and it's off the east coast of Florida. So what's the difference here? Well, the European AI has the system developing further south, and so the system's position relative to the Bermuda High is further away. So the pull towards the northwest is not as strong. So the system eventually does still come northwest, but this allows more time for Humberto further east to get closer to, by this time, Imelda. And what's going to happen is, like we talked about a couple of days ago, is these systems may begin to interact with each other, do the Fujiwara effect, as it's called. And that's where the circulations of these storms will begin to impact the track of both of them. So Humberto being on the east side of what would be Imelda by this point, the southerly flow on the east side of that low. So Imelda's going to try and push Humberto to the north. But Humberto on the western side, it has northerly flow. So it's going to try to fight Imelda and try to not have it go into the Carolinas. And so on this model, you see that the system gets rather close to the coast, and then it just kind of stops there because Humberto sort of just says no, and it doesn't ever make landfall. And so by that point, as Humberto begins to go out to sea, the westerly flow in the subtropical jet carries what would be Imelda by this point out to sea as well. And we never actually get a landfall on this model in the southeastern coast. And that does have pretty big implications because this changes entirely who gets the strongest wind impacts with the system overall by this point. And we've also seen some scenarios where the system even goes further out to sea as it interacts with Humberto. And if it tracks even further out to sea, that may limit even the rainfall potential with this system. Now, for now, the consensus today is that the system will get uncomfortably close to the southeastern coast. And even in a scenario like the European AI does show here, we would likely still see some pretty significant rainfall occur here across the southeastern United States. The reason for that is because of this trough sitting over the southeastern United States. This is out to 8 p.m. Sunday local time. So you can see that what would be Imelda is tracking towards the northwest on the model. Here's this trough axis here over the northeastern Gulf of Mexico and southeastern United States. And if you look east of this trough axis, we've got all this green coloring here. This is showing you a lot of strong flow at the upper levels of the atmosphere, a strong jet streak, it's what it's called. And what this promotes in this part of the atmosphere is a lot of divergence, so air spreading away at the top of the troposphere. And so at the surface, the effect of this is a lot of rising air on the southeastern flank of this trough. And that causes thunderstorm development alongside the tropical system that we have here. And so what this may do is cause a lot of moisture to partly held by Imelda to come north into the Carolinas, even if we never see a landfall here. I could show you this if we look at the moisture plot from the HAFS model, and you can see that right now, the system, all the moisture is kept down south into the Caribbean islands. But as that trough starts to dig in and we see the jet streak take place further north, we see a long streak of moisture start to open up right into the Carolina coast. And this continues even if the system does not make landfall. Now, the HAPS model does make landfall here, but let's say hypothetically it stalls out here and it never really makes landfall like the European AI. You can kind of get the picture here that all this moisture is still coming on shore because of not only the southerly shear that the trough axis is imparting upon the vortex of Imelda by this point, but also because of all the divergence in this part of the atmosphere, it's fostering convection and thunderstorms in this part of the U.S., contributing to rainfall that is going to happen even if Imelda doesn't make landfall or not. And so this could lead to some significant flooding risk along the Carolinas and Georgia, and even further north, potentially, even if the system never makes landfall. So that's something to keep in mind here, is that a landfall does not fully determine exact impacts here along the southeast coast. And the most likely scenario right now, at least seemingly with models today, is that the system will get close enough to bring heavy rainfall and a lot of moisture to the southeast U.S. So it will likely be a wet weekend going into early to mid next week as the system kind of meanders here off the southeast coast. And just to show some of the track uncertainty that we still have with the system, this is the GFS ensemble. There's about 31 different members, so 31 different runs of the GFS, and you can see some of the uncertainty here. Some of these models, a good chunk, take it out to sea still. Some of them take it inland into the Carolinas. So we still have a lot of spread to iron out here, and a lot of this does have to do with where the system forms down south. But again, even if the system doesn't make landfall, we may still get a lot of moisture coming up here, which could lead to some heavy rainfall. And make sure you're staying tuned to local weather offices, as they'll have the latest information and flood forecasts as this whole situation progresses. And of course, I'm going to have more videos on these two systems, including the West Pacific system as well, over the next few days as they progress. But for now, that's all that I've got for today. Stay safe in the Greater Antilles as the rainfall continues from 94L, and as well stay safe in the Philippines as Opong comes through in the central Philippines today. That's all for now. Thanks for watching.